Welcome back to my little corner of YouTube. In this video, I'm going to be upgrading an internal fuel pump. I'm going to be installing an aftermarket fuel pressure regulator. And just because I don't have faith in an eBay special boost gauge, I'm going to be installing a TurboSmart one. Let's get to it. So this is my 1986 VL Commodore Executive. It was originally NA, but it's got an OEM style turbo kit in it now. Also got an intercooler. I bought it originally off a middle-aged bloke who used it as his daily driver. So it was as a daily condition, if you call it that. So faded paint and a bit of rust here and there. I took it off the road for about 6 months, and in this shed I did all the rust repairs and I sprayed it in its original Asteroid Silver. It was, I'm not sure whether it had MX grey bars or they had been painted later on in its life, so I kept with the theme of the single tone for this car and sprayed the bars as well. The interior is quite neat and she runs well. So she's running about 10 PSI boost with the intercooler. The timing is set to about 12 and I don't have any pinging or anything like that, so it's all good. It's running all right. However, just for peace of mind, I'm going to be upgrading the fuel system. I'm not going to go crazy. I'm just going to replace the internal lift pump with a Walbro 255 and hopefully deleting the external pump, because the 255 should flow probably about 80% more than the original two pump setup. I don't think I'll be upgrading the wiring. My theory is it was originally powering two pumps, so surely the one pump, which probably uses a bit more amps, isn't going to overload the system. If I melt fuses, if I melt plugs, then so be it, I'll upgrade it, no problems. Obviously with the upgraded fuel system, I do want to make sure that the fuel pressure regulator is up to the task. That's why I'm going to install the TurboSmart fuel pressure regulator as well. Make sure it can handle the flow of the new fuel pump. And look, we're not talking about 500 horsepower here or anything like that, but a little bit of a bump up from OEM. And lastly, I don't have any faith with the original boost gauge that literally is a $20 eBay special. I'm gonna turf that, throw it in the bin and put in a TurboSmart boost gauge. I think it's justified. So let's get started. One thing I didn't talk about is the return. It'll be interesting to see whether the fuel hose that runs to the swirl pot is actually in one piece, because they usually perish and obviously the return doesn't go into the swirl pot, and then you get surging and stuff if you hook around corners and play Mr. Drifter. But I think I'm going to uncrimp or unsolder that pipe, because that runs alongside the feed and drops into the swirl pot next to the feed, and you can use that as a return. I mean, there's not heaps of length, so it might be a bit difficult getting a bit of hose clamped onto there, but I'm definitely going to give it a go, because that will alleviate this problem from ever happening again. Even though I do have submersible fuel hose to replace it with, and replace the filter while I'm at it. Okay, there's the old external pump and the fuel dampener. Now I'm getting rid of this assembly, so we won't be having any external pumps in my setup. In need of a new sock. I put a torch inside the tank and it looks very clean. As you can tell from the sender as well, it's actually pretty clean in there. I'll be removing that and putting the Walbro 255 in its place. And luckily for me, the return to the swell pot is in one piece. Must have been replaced previous to me getting the car. So it's pretty good. So obviously the new fuel pump is longer. So I cut the little bracket there for that one. So this one can sit a little bit further down past the bracket. I might just chop that a little bit shorter and then I can get a small bit of hose on there. To attach the pump outlet to the sender's hardline, I'm using 8mm submersible fuel hose. It's expensive compared to normal high pressure EFI hose, but it's got to be done considering it'll be sitting in fuel. The normal stuff will go soft and break down, and then you'll be wondering why there's no fuel travelling to your engine. Because the pump is physically longer, and I cut off the mounting bracket the old pump used, I've attached the pump to the sender using a stainless hose clamp. Now to sort out the wiring. I used a predetermined plug that came with the new pump, chopped the original pair of wires leaving some length, and using the supplied crimp connectors, I joined the wires. It pays to go back to the vehicle and double check what colour wires correspond to negative and positive of the fuel pump power connector. In this case, purple is 12 volt and black is negative. I didn't have to remove the panhard rod to get the sender unit in and out of the fuel tank. It's very doable, you just have to maneuver it a few directions. Make sure to be careful with the fuel gauge float. You don't want to manhandle it and bend the rod, otherwise you'll have false fuel level readings. These fuel pumps sit inside of a swell pot. Once I wrangle the unit inside the tank, I make sure to turn the sender unit so that the fuel pump and filter section is at 9 o'clock. Put the sender unit so the mounting ring is touching, then turn anti-clockwise so the fuel pump drops into the swell pot. Once I'm confident it's sitting where it should and the bolt holes line up, I insert the bolts and plug everything back in. Got to start her up. See if she runs with the new fuel pump. Priming. No problems. Oh, looks like there's no leaks. Beautiful. Time for the new TurboSmart fuel pressure regulator. This is part of their compact range, rated to about 800 horsepower and tapped in 1/8 inch NPT ports. I bought SpeedFlow NPT to 8mm barb fittings so to utilise the standard EFI hose. I hate drilling unnecessary holes, especially in engine bays, so here I'm knocking together a simple bracket to mount the reg to the front of the master cylinder support bracket. Because on this application the fuel pressure regulator is at the end of the rail, the main feed from the fuel pump goes straight to the rail as normal, and then the inlet of the fuel pressure regulator comes from the end of the rail and the return on the bottom of the fuel pressure regulator back to the tank. I wanted to remove the original fuel pressure regulator, and usually you need to take the top half of the plenum off to access the bolt. It took me longer than I would care to admit, but I managed to get in there. Alrighty, so the original fuel pressure regulator in there, I managed to take it off without taking the top part of the intake runners. That was a bit hard. I didn't want it left in there, especially now that it's not being used. This is the feed out of the rail into the fuel pressure regulator. I've ran it through the runners, around the back, into that port of the FPR. The bottom one is the return, connects to the original return. So now I've got to turn it on, make sure there's no leaks, and then set the base pressure. So 3 bar or 43 psi. vacuum source, put that in. And it drops down to 30 something. I'm pretty sure that's set up. Fuel pressure regulator done. I'm going to reroute these hoses and piss this off. I'm going to run an actual silicone vacuum hose for the new boost gauge. So I'll get to that now. I had a bit of a brain fart. Throughout the night I was doing some reading and I should have used this on the threads of those speed flow fittings. So I'm just going to block the fuel lines, unscrew it, put some of the sealant on, and then should all be good. Because I was being cheap, I used an old vent that I cut out and I threw this crappy boost gauge in. I didn't even hook up the wires, so I should have a spare one of these. I'll replace it. And much to the disappointment of the wider VL community, I'm going to put it in here. So I'm going to find the center, drill out a 52mm hole. I'm going to use, hopefully it works, I'm going to use the original, this spacer that came with the boost gauge. So once I slide it in, it sort of points it upwards towards me. That's the plan anyway. Let's try it out. So carefully with a hole saw, got a nice 52mm hole there, used a file and a burr tip on the drill just to bevel the corners, because now the gauge is going to go down in a bit of an angle. So if the hole is too tight to the can of the gauge, then it's going to want to always sit flush with the angle of the plate there. So that's all done. I was able to get the gauge in there and actually tilt it up and down. So I've very carefully super glued the visor, the bezel, into position. That sits nicely. I'll let that dry for a bit longer. I don't want to go wrenching on it. And grab some illumination circuit, which I'll probably grab from the cigarette lighter towards the back. So grab that, feed it through, connect it up to the gauge, put it all in, and it should be good. I'm not using the bracket that came with the gauge. I didn't know how I could make it work with this setup, but luckily this outer visor is a nice press fit, so it's not going to fall out when cranking mad boost. Now, so I'm going to be tapping into the cigarette lighter circuit. Now, I've put my hand in and I've felt and I found this this split tubing, and it goes right directly behind the plug. And I've just peeled it back a bit and you can see 3 wires. Now, because this cigarette lighter has the illuminated ring, one of these comes on with the lights, and then you've got positive and negative for your actual cigarette lighter. So I think because the boost gauge only has the 2 wires, and it's just pretty much to illuminate it at night, I am going to tap into the illumination signal. So lights come on, boost gauge comes on. I don't want the lights on all the time. I mean, I could connect it up to this wire and it'll be constant every time I've got ignition on, but I want the lights to come on when the lights of the car comes on. So I'll peel that back somewhere and splice into it. Okay, so I've got it probed into the wire that I think is the one. Ignition on, no lights. Turn the lights on, power's up. Lights off, lights on. So that's the one. And that's it for the VL. I hope you found this video useful, interesting, and helpful. So that's new fuel pump installed in the original hanger, the external fuel pump deleted, a new TurboSmart fuel pressure regulator with a little custom bracket made up, and a TurboSmart boost gauge drilled into the dash there. All seems to be working, all is good. I'm going to book it in for a tune just to make sure the mixtures and everything like that is safe. I don't want to go lunching any motors, and that's it. Plenty left to do in Panga's shed, so I'll see you around in the next one. Cheers. See ya.